First, for those of you not familiar with our swans, we do have lovely swans. One of the wonderful things that makes our campus so human are these beautiful birds who live beside our refectory. If the swans were giving this lecture tonight, they would tell you that they come from the genus Cygnus, which is where we get the term cygnet from for the baby swans. They would tell you that in Scandinavian languages, their word swan comes from the word svan, which means sound or to sing. Interestingly enough, in the 21st century, they're monogamous. They mate for life. That's unusual today, isn't it, huh? The Hindus greatly revered and respected the swans. They said that a swan is like a saintly person. It's one who has the ability to be in the world without being attached to it. Some of us in business and academia might learn some things, and government and political affairs, from the swans. Juvenal, during the Roman era, described the swans, or this term black swan, as rara avis in terris, necroque semolina sintno, which means a good person is as rare as the black swan. So you see, the term black swan has a long history. But interestingly enough, the black swan was only discovered in the 1980s in Australia, after it was assumed for thousands of years that all swans indeed were white. But in Western Australia, the black swan was discovered, and Nicholas Taleb, at the same time, conceived this theory that there are outliers. There are, in fact, high-impact events that are hard to predict, and indeed rare events that may determine our future on planet Earth. And so here's some examples of black swan theory. World War I, personal computers, the internet, 11 September 2001, and more recently, the collapse of the banks, the credit crunch. So what are the outliers and the outcomes that result from these random events, these high impact, these unplanned events? Well, in terms of World War I, the jet airplane. I once had a lecturer give a speech at George Washington University. He was British, and he began his lecture by saying, "The history of the meetings industry is the history of war." And he went on to describe how without the Great World War, there would be no jet airplane, which created the possibility for international travel. The personal computer, automation, how it's transformed our lives. The internet, the creation of global trade, as evidenced by the book The World is Flat by Tom Friedman. And of course, although we have global trade today and global transit and travel, it's getting more difficult to access it because of the tragedy of 11 September and the continuing struggles with terrorism that have created barriers to travel and trade. And finally, the credit crunch, which has led to the collapse of financial markets. So these are the outliers, and indeed, these are the outcomes that have occurred as a result. Now, another author by the name of Malcolm Gladwell has written a number of books. Some of you are familiar with them. One is called Blink, but his most recent book is called Outliers. And in that, he has studied hundreds of successful people, the top people in their field. And he's looked at what are the universal components or the anecdotal evidence that promotes this success. And so, for example, he asks, why are the majority of Canadian hockey players born in the first few months of the year? How did Bill Gates from Microsoft, Larry Ellison from Oracle achieve such wealth? Are there any common denominators? Why do airline pilots who are born in one area of the United States have fewer accidents than others? I've thought recently when I board an airplane to say to the pilot, "Where are you from?" But I'm not going to do that. He asks, are there more variables involved in a person's individual success than society often cares to admit? And he states that what we do as a community, as a society, for each other, matters as much as what we do for ourselves, to be part of the world, as was suggested earlier by the Hindus. And he cites the 10,000 rule. He uses the Beatles as an example, but the 10,000 rule actually comes from the philosopher Anders Ericsson, and it simply means that the Beatles performed their music 10,000 times before they achieved any measure of success. So whilst I thank the principal for her warm introduction, the fact is it takes practice to get it right over and over and over again. And in fact, he suggests that there is evidence that the pieces that solve this puzzle are contained in family, culture, and the friendship that we're enjoying tonight in terms of success. In fact, he reduces it to ambition plus effort plus opportunity equals success. And I argue that planned events may indeed provide the future opportunities for our success as we nurture our family, our culture, and our friendship through events such as this one tonight.